I invite you to take your pew Bibles now, turn to page 800. Gospel of Matthew, I'm getting a little, page 799. Gospel of Matthew, chapter 18, verse 15. And having found that, let's stand and read the gospel together. 5 verses 15 through 20. In the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew has 5 collections of teachings by Jesus. This is part of one of those teaching sections following the Transfiguration. He's been speaking about greatness, and he's moving to teaching about forgiveness. Here he speaks about our life together. Reading together. If another member of the church sins against you, go out and point out the fault when the 2 of you are alone. If the member listens to you, you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every word may be confirmed by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly I tell you, if 2 of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. We give thanks for this, the reading of God's word. So good morning, everyone. I see you, Alice Butler. Go Coco, right? There's a lot of folks, the tennis fans and many in the congregation this morning are celebrating the victory of Coco Gauff yesterday on the U.S. Women's Open. Greetings. I have a text on my phone, greetings from Reverend Dale Edmondson, who worshiped at a Baptist church in London this morning, and said there was a fine sermon on economic justice. Again, prayers for those who are representing us at the Pride Festival in downtown Oakland. So the words we read this morning are likely familiar to you, and if you have read them and studied them or heard them interpreted or seen them implemented, they come out as something of a blueprint. And I want to start by noting that there's a specificity to these words. It's within the church, within the body of Christ, and it's when a member sins against you, not when they do something you don't like, or something you don't understand, or something that makes you uncomfortable. It's when they actually sin against you. There is that demand of somehow doing harm. And if we read these verses, or if we've seen them implemented, or maybe even experienced them being implemented, you know the drill. First, you go and you speak to a person in private. And there's some good wisdom in that. Just a private word. And then if somehow the word is not being heard, and that's another thing we have to be careful for. Just because someone doesn't agree with you doesn't mean that you haven't been heard. All right, sometimes that "you're not hearing me" gets thrown around a little bit, and hearing there's a difference between hearing and agreeing. Being heard is different than being agreed with. But if you haven't been heard, then bring in 2 or 3 witnesses. And witnesses are important on the pages of the Bible, in any truth-telling situation, and even in any court situation. Witnesses, and witnesses that agree, are very important. Of course, we know that witnesses can be manipulated. There were 2 or 3 witnesses that were gathered against Jesus. And they agreed, but they were being manipulated. And then the progression. And if this meeting with the 2 or 3 doesn't work, then bring in the whole church. And then, if bringing in the whole church doesn't work, let that person be as a Gentile or tax collector to you. And generally, this passage is interpreted, these words are interpreted as, now you really get to be done with them, to say, be gone with you, kick them out, disfellowship them. The only problem is, in Jesus' life, in Jesus' teaching, in Jesus' ministry, Gentiles and tax collectors were not a problem. Gentiles and tax collectors were often the focus of Jesus' love, of Jesus' touch, of Jesus' reach, of Jesus' welcome. Unfortunately, in the long history of this text that we read this morning, there's been some detailed attention paid to the blueprint. But when we've gone through step 1, go to the person in private. Step 2, the witness of 2 or 3. Step 3, bring in the whole church. When we've gone through that, there's almost a joyful rush to judgment. And now we get to clobber you. Now we get to kick you out. Now we get to send you away. Now we get to speak as one, be gone with you. It's almost a joy in that judgment. This text has frequently been used as an excuse for othering. Familiar with that term, othering? There's a little definition about it in your bulletin. The words of preparation. These words are from Professor Jason Bivens. He's at North Carolina State University, series of lectures thinking about religion and violence. Othering takes place when there's a competition for goods, resources, ideas. We could be status, attention. Othering takes place when there's some significant tension. And it takes place when we make ourselves righteous and others demonic, evil, and monstrous. And in the long history of interpretation and application of these words of Jesus, as recorded in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 20, they've been used as an excuse for othering, for making ourselves righteous and others demonic, evil, and monstrous. And they have been used in this othering almost joyfully, gleefully. Often when I hear these words taught, interpreted, the phrase comes up, and you're probably well familiar with the phrase. hate the sin, love the sinner. You heard that before? Hate the sin, love the sinner, and it flows off our tongue so easily sometimes, so glibly. The problem is, any sentence that begins with hate is problematic. Any sentence that begins with hate is problematic. It's slightly less odious when we shift them around, love the sinner, hate the sin, but still tend to emphasize the hate, find justification for the hate, find rationale for the othering. That unfortunately we are so inclined to do. Christopher Harbin writes, "Sure, you can scout the Bible and find a phrase about God abhorring one's sin. You can find a text that says something to the effect of God hating sin. That is not, however, the attitude we see in Jesus' dealings with people. Love the sinner, hate the sin begins with a statement of condemnation. It begins by considering others as less worthy than the one making the declaration. It communicates that those people are sinners and I hate their sin. It hardly includes the speaker as one of the sinners whose sin is hateful. Instead of communicating love, grace, acceptance, it immediately erects a barrier between us and them, whomever they happen to be. That is not love. Love does not otherize. Love does not lump people into categories of worth. Love does not pump itself up while tearing another down. Love raises the other up. Love first welcomes and includes. See, if we take this passage as a whole, it's like now you can teach them, treat them like Gentiles and tax collectors. Now you can otherize them. We tend to take that one sentence out of the movement of the text as a whole. The movement of the text as a whole begins with the body, the church. It moves through the instruction of how we're going to deal with each other in some complicated situation. And then it ends with, wherever two or three are gathered, there I am in the midst of them. The emphasis throughout this text is not on separating, but on connecting. Now, I recognize there's some times when there are behaviors, that are actions that are hurtful, harmful, and the body needs to say, there's no place for that here. It's a place for accountability. But there's a big difference between accountability and othering. Accountability recognizes the humanity one of the other. Othering at some point denies that. They're just a piece of trash. And this text calls us to recognize the power of connecting. When two, even three are gathered together, there I am. That's good news. Tomorrow is September 11th. September 11th, 2023. 22 years since September 11th, 2001. The terrorist attacks, Pentagon, Twin Towers, the plane that landed in Pennsylvania, others perhaps were planned. And in the midst of the terror of those attacks, there was some significant othering that was approved of in these United States of America. It wasn't a specific group of terrorists, Al-Qaeda, that was responsible for this. It was Islam in general. Othering. Instead of a police action in Afghanistan, we sent a country to war at great cost. And continued that war in Iraq at great loss of life and resources and international goodwill. What was needed was accountability. Sadly, it devolved into othering. I'm talking at a personal scale, a community scale, an international scale. And unfortunately, this text, with its emphasis on the importance of community and connection, has often been used as an excuse for othering. I'm feeling a little bit right now in the city of Oakland. You know, while there's been an actual decrease in the number of homicides, the crime has gone up. Break-ins, robberies, burglaries, and there needs to be attention needs to be paid, significant attention needs to be paid to the rule of law, to accountability. But there's a danger. There's a danger in moments like this in the city of Oakland that we move from accountability to othering. We need to find those kids and lock them up. I'm not so sure that has been proven to be the best response. Accountability, yes. Rule of law, yes. Othering, no. The power of othering, it can take root in our souls. Friday night in the United States, early Saturday in Morocco, I think it was. Massive earthquake. Massive. 6.8. Historic buildings come down. Old cities in rubble. Neighbors saw the homes of their neighbors collapse. Current estimates are that over 2,000 died. And Morocco is waiting to see what the response of the world will be. And there is a fear, a justified fear on their part, that all the othering that has gone on in regards to the Muslim world is going to translate into a rather muted response to the humanitarian crisis that country is experiencing. There is a way to use Jesus' teaching in Matthew chapter 18. But please, when we try to implement it, even within the small body of the church, understand that the emphasis falls on connection as opposed to othering. Let them be as Gentiles and tax collectors to you. Who is it that Jesus loved? Who is it that he was accused of spending way too much time with? Gentiles, tax collectors. When we read this text, when we put it to use, Let's make it about accountability and connection and gathering. And let's recognize that the great danger in this text is that it becomes a platform for othering. And othering stands as one of the great sins of the Church of Jesus Christ. Accountability, yes. Othering, no. Let's be about connection. 2 or 3 gathering, resolutely gathering in the name of the one who welcomed and loved and included Gentiles and tax collectors. Amen.